We continue now at the top of Daf Chavtesam Beis in Meseches Rosh Hashana. This is Rosh Hashana Daf 29b. Rava here asks the following question: Birchas halechem shel matzah. Let's say we're talking about the bracha hamotzi that we say when we eat matzah on Pesach. Ubirchas hayayin shel kiddush hayom. Or let's say the bracha we say bor preagafen when we're making kiddush on Shabbos or Yontiv. So what's the halacha in those situations? We said earlier that by birchas hanenin, once a person was already yotzei for himself, he can't be motzi others. If you already said a bor preagafen for yourself, let's say you can't say Bor Preagafen on behalf of someone else. But what about over here, where the Bor Preagafen is part of an obligation, it's part of Kiddush, or the Hamotzi Lechem in Haaretz is part of an obligation, it's part of the mitzvah of Matzah, so what's the halacha then? Kevan dechovahu mapik. Maybe we'll say since these are obligations, therefore he could be motzi others, because we say Kol Yisrael Aravin Zeh Bozeh, everybody's responsible for one another when it comes to the obligations. O Dilmer, maybe no, bracha lav chovahi, this particular bracha, the Bore Preagafen, the hamotzi, that's not really the obligation. The obligation is the mitzvah to eat the matzah. The obligation is the kiddush hayom. So therefore, maybe the person is not allowed to be motzi somebody else if he was already yotzei. Rashi over here explains birchas halechem shel achilas matzah shemavarchen hamotzi. Again, on the achilas matzah, we make a bracha of hamotzi. Ubirchas hayayin shemavarchen lifnei kiddush. Also, we make a bor preagafen before kiddush. So what's the halacha al achilas matzah mekadesh Yisrael lo tiboy lach techovaninu? Rashi explains the bracha of al achilas matzah and the bracha of Mekadesh Yisrael, meaning those brachos of Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, let's say that we say a bracha that there's a mitzvah to eat matzah, that's not a question. Those are obligations. Umapik, certainly, even if a person's already been yotzi himself, he can be motzi others. That's not a question. Elabirchas hamotzi uvirchas hayayin mi boilam. We're only asking about the bracha of hamotzi lechem in haaretz, and we're asking also about the bracha of the bor preagafen. Shein bos el lefiyam shehamevarech tzarich sheyitom. Those are not obligations. Those are just because the person making the bracha has an obligation to eat, and once you're eating, you have to make those brachas like we said before. V'yev shaleyanus below bracha, like we said before, you can't get hana from this world without a bracha. Inami lo toimiu, and even if, let's say, that person didn't taste, somebody's going to have to eat from it. Uvoy bracha, and the bracha is required. So then, what's the halacha? Since in general, eating matzah is an obligation, also kiddush is also an obligation. And it's impossible to fulfill the obligation without getting the benefit. And it's impossible to get the benefit without saying these brachos of, again, hamotzi or bor preagafen. So nimtzas hamitzvah teluya b'birchas hano mapik. So then we'll say it's all really an obligation, and you can be motzi somebody else. O dilmor, maybe not. Birchas hano lav chovu l'mitzvah asya. The birchas hano isn't really part of the obligation of the mitzvah. Sha'af b'chol hano yosino, I guess that's true by all times that a person is deriving benefit. So that's the question over here. Again, can you be motzi others or not? And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come and hear the following proof. The Omer Rav Ashi, because Rav Ashi says, Ki avinon bei Rav Papi, when I was by the house of Rav Papi, have a mekadesh lon, first he would make kiddush for us, v'chi have a osi arisa midabra, and then when his sharecropper would come from the field, have a mekadesh lu, he'd make kiddush again for that person. So you see that you are allowed, even by the bori preagafen, you're allowed to repeat it for somebody else, even if you've already been yotzei, you can be motzi somebody else. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Lo yifros adam prusa la'orchin, a person shouldn't break bread for his guests, elim kein ochel imoim, unless he's also eating with them. Rashi says it's the same like we've been saying before. Lo yifros birchas hamotzi kedamrin leil, a person can't make a bracha of hamotzi for somebody else unless it's also for himself. She'ena chova aleim lo yochlu v'lo yivarchu. Again, it's not an obligation, the birchas hamotzi, so again, if the person's not eating, the person shouldn't make the bracha on behalf of somebody else. That's what it means here. Lo yifros adam prusa la'orchin elim kein ochel imoim, unless he's eating also the bread, he shouldn't say hamotzi for them. But a person is allowed to break bread for his children, for the people of his household, in order to teach them mitzvahs. In other words, for education purposes, even if the person himself does not really need to make this bracha, he can make the bracha for others in order to teach them how to make brachas properly. And then it says, when it comes to halal and megillah, so those are obligations, even though the person already has fulfilled his own obligation, he can be motzi others. Hadron Allah, Ru'u Bezin, will return to you, Perek, Ru'u Bezin. That is the conclusion of the third Perek of Meseches Rosh Hashana. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel, and please like, share, and subscribe. And we will now begin the fourth Perek of Meseches Rosh Hashana. And the Mishnah says, Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashana Shechol Lios B'Shabbos. Let's say Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos. So b'mikdash hayu token. In the Beis HaMikdash, they would still blow shofar, avolo b'Medina, but not outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Rashi over here says, Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashana shechol lios b'Shabbos b'mikdash hayu token b'Gemara mefarish lo. The Gemara will explain this. Avolo b'Medina, but not outside the Beis HaMikdash. Lo b'Yerushalayim v'lo b'Gvulin. Not in Yerushalayim and not outside, even outside of Yerushalayim, all those areas, they would not blow shofar on Shabbos. Mishachara Beis HaMikdash, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so Hizkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana, shiu token b'chol makom sheyesh bo bezdin, that they should blow shofar in any area where there's a bezdin. So the Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Lo Hizkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ella b'Yavna bilvad. This takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was not in any place where there's a bezdin, only in Yavna he made such a takana that you blow shofar even on Shabbos. Amru lo, they said back to him, they said back to Rabbi Elazar, Echad Yavna v'Echad Kol Makom sheyesh bo bezdin. No, the takana was made in Yavna, but it was also made in any area where there was a bezdin. And the Mishnah continues, V'yod zos haisi Yerushalayim yaseir al Yavna. There was one other area in which Yerushalayim was more than Yavna. In other words, even though they made a takana that in Yavna you should blow shofar on Shabbos, don't think that Yavna was the equivalent of Yerushalayim. It was not the equivalent. Shekol yer shehi roa v'shomas ukrova v'yechola lavo. Because the halacha by Yerushalayim was any city that could see and hear and was close, and you can come to Yerushalayim from that area. Token, they would still blow shofar even on Shabbos. Uve Yavna, but when it came to Yavna, lo token ella bebezdin bilvad. They would only blow the shofar in the actual bezdin. And Rashi over here says ella b'Yavna, again only in Yavna. Shahais Hashem Sanhedrin Gedola b'Yamav. At the times of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great Sanhedrin was in Yavna. The same would be true anywhere where the Sanhedrin was. The point over here is, this would not be true in a court of only 23. It was only true in the Sanhedrin Gedola. There they would blow, even on Shabbos. Then the Mishnah says that in this regard as well, Yerushalayim was greater when Yerushalayim was built, when there was Beis HaMikdash, in terms of blowing shofar on Shabbos. Shekol yer sheroes Yerushalayim, because any city that could see Yerushalayim, Mishomas v'yechol lavo, could hear and could come, mefarish b'Gemara, ma'itana dekamar v'yod. The Gemara is going to explain what do we mean that we're saying over here the word v'od. In other words, we didn't talk at all about how Yerushalayim was greater than Yavna. That's something we're saying furthermore in the following way. Yerushalayim is greater than Yavna. That's going to be addressed in the Gemara. And the Gemara says, Minohani mili, from where do we know these words? In other words, from where do we know that blowing shofar should even be a problem on Shabbos? And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Levi bar Lachma, Rabbi Chama bar Chanina. Rabbi Levi bar Lachma says in the name of Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Kasav echad omer Shabboson zichron trua. One pasuk talks about the fact that it's a remembrance of the trua, as if you're not actually blowing the shofar, you're just remembering it. You're mentioning the idea of the trua. The Chasav echad omer Yom Trua Yelachem, and the other pasuk says it's a day of trua, as if you're actually blowing the trua. So how do we understand the psukim? So Lokash, it's not difficult. Kan be Yom Tov shechol lios b'Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, then we don't actually blow the shofar. Kan be Yom Tov shechol lios b'chol. But when Yom Tov falls out on a weekday, that's when we blow shofar. In other words, the Gemara is here saying that it's a doraisa, that you're not allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Amar Rava says, Imi doraisa. If this is a din midoraisa, but mikdash heichi takin, and how are you blowing shofar in the Beis HaMikdash? It said in our Mishnah that in the Beis HaMikdash, even on Shabbos, they would blow the shofar. If it's an Isra Doraisa to blow the shofar on Shabbos, you certainly would not be able to do it in the Beis HaMikdash as well. V'yod halav melochi titzdarech cholamute. And furthermore, we're not talking here, what melacha is blowing shofar that the pasuk would say that you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos? How is that a melacha? How should that be prohibited? The Tana Devei Shmuel, because it was taught in the yeshiva of Shmuel, Kol meleches avoda lo sasu. It talks about the fact that you're not allowed to do malacha. Yotzta tekiah shofar redias hapas she chachma ve'ena malacha. That comes to exclude blowing of the shofar, and redias hapas, that talks about removing of the bread from the oven. Those were chachmas. Those were things that took skill, but they were not considered malacha. It says explicitly over here that tekiah shofar is not considered a malacha, and therefore would not be a problem on a doraisa level to blow shofar on Shabbos. And so the Gemara says, rather, Amar Rava says, Midoraisa Mishra Shari. Really, you're right. On a Doraisa level, blowing shofar on Shabbos is not a problem at all. V'Rabbanan hu de Gazer Bey. And it was the Rabbanan who made a gezer, they made a decree against blowing shofar on Shabbos. Kid Rabba, like Rabba says, the Amar Rabba, because Rabba said, Hakol chayavin b'tkiyah shofar. Everybody's chayiv when it comes to blowing the shofar. V'yein hakol b'kiyin b'tkiyah shofar. But not everybody is an expert when it comes to tkiyah shofar. Meaning, Gezeira Shami Yitlenu Biyado. because we have to make a decree. Maybe someone's going to take the shofar in his hands. He'll go and carry the shofar to the expert to learn, because again, like we said, not everybody's an expert in terms of blowing the shofar. Then we're afraid the person's going to end up carrying 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah. In other words, when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, the real concern is that a person might end up carrying the shofar, and that's why we say that a person should not blow shofar on Shabbos. V'hainu time of the lulav, v'hainu time of the megillah. And the Gemara concludes the same thing is true in lulav. We don't shake lulav on Shabbos. The same thing is true in Megillah. We don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. All for the same reason. It's a concern that you might end up coming to carry either the lulav or the Megillah. And Rashi over here explains Gezeira Shemi Yitzlenu v'mikdash lo gazer. In the Beis HaMikdash there is no Gezeira. Dein Isur Shvus D'Rabbanan b'Mikdash, because there's a general rule. We don't have Isurei D'Rabbanan, we don't have Isur Shvus in the Beis HaMikdash, and that explains our Mishnah why in the Beis HaMikdash they would blow shofar even on Shabbos. The Gemara continues at the 2 dots, quoting the Mishnah, Mishachara Beis HaMikdash, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai v'chulu. It said that when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that in areas where there was a bezdin, they should blow shofar even on Shabbos. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Pamachas chol Rosh Hashanah lios b'Shabbos. One time, Rosh Hashanah fell out on Shabbos. V'hayu kol orim Wisconsin, and the cities were gathering. Amar lehem Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lifnei Beseira. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to the Bnei Beseira, Niska, let's blow shofar. Amar lo, they said to him, Nidon, let's discuss it first. Amar lehem Niska, he said, let's first blow shofar. V'achagach Nidon, he said to them, let's first blow shofar, and then we'll discuss it. La'achar shataku, after they blew shofar, Amar lo Nidon, they said, okay, let's discuss it now. Amar lehem, he said to them, Kvar nishma karen b'Yavna. The horn was already heard in Yavna. In other words, the idea is we already blew it. There's no point in going back after it's already done. What's done is done, and that's how this takana came into effect, that they would blow shofar even on Shabbos in Yavna or in areas where there was a bezdin. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rebbe Elazar says, Lo hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ela b'Yavna bilvad. Rebbe Elazar said, no, the takana was only made in Yavna. It wasn't made anywhere where there was a court. This is a quote from the Mishnah. Amru lo, so then the Mishnah continued, they said back to him, Echad Yavna v'echad kol makom sheyesh bo bezdin. It was in Yavna, but it was also in any area where there was a bezdin. So the Gemara says, Amru lo hainu Tanakama. The Amru lo is just a repeat of what the Tanakama said. In other words, Rebbe Elazar was saying it was only in Yavna. The Tanakama said it's anywhere. And then they said back, it's anywhere. It's exactly the same as what the Tanakama said. And so the Gemara says, no, Ika Beinaya, there's a difference between the first Tana of the Mishnah and the last Tana of the Mishnah. Beidina d'Akroi, talking about, let's say you have a Bezdin that's just Akroi, it's just temporary. Rashi over here explains, Bezdin d'Akroi, l'Tanakama takinan. According to the Tanakama, any place where there's a Bezdin, you blow shofar, even if it's a situation where it's just Akroi, it's just a temporary setup. V'Tana do Amru lo savar, but the Tana at the end of the Mishnah, that Tana holds, Echad Yavna v'echad kol makom sheyesh bo bezdin kavua. Has to be a place like Yavna where there's a bezdin kavua. Has to be an established bezdin, dumya de Yavna, similar to Yavna. But if it's just a bezdin akroi, then the last Tana of the Mishnah would say you don't blow shofar in that area on Shabbos. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots, quoting the Mishnah, Amru lo, again, they said to him, Echad Yavna v'echad kol makom sheyesh bo bezdin. It's true in Yavna, and any area where there's a bezdin. Amar Rav Huna says, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph.